Welcome to Abundant EM. Turn to your neighbor and say, I'm really, really glad you're here. Ready, set, go. I'm really, really glad you're here. Caitlin, I love that you follow directions so well. That's right. Okay. We love that you are here. We are glad that you are here. Because honestly, in this generation, to be at church is more of a rarity, okay? And so I am really, really proud to have all of you guys here in this room, in this place, to hear the word of the Lord. So today, our message title is God's Good Law out of Exodus 20, verses 2 to 17. Let's all stand. We're going to read the word of the Lord out loud together. It's 3 slides, not too long, okay? So here we are in Exodus 20, verses 1 to 4. We're going to read it out loud together. Ready? Begin. Then God gave the people all these instructions. I am the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. Ready? Begin. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you go unpunished if you misuse his name. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. Last slide. Ready? Begin. Honor your father and mother, then you will live a long, full life in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You must not murder. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely against your neighbor. You must not covet your neighbor's house. You must not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Be seated. All right, so a couple of us, about a year ago, I think now, we did our Bible study on the 10 Commandments. And it's the deeper you go into it, the more there is to find. And the same thing today. So we are here in our volume in the Gospel Project, Volume 2, on law and life. And today, we just wrapped up Volume 4 last week, which is about God's miraculous work, how he miraculously called Moses, how he miraculously moved Pharaoh and Egypt through various plagues and might and wonder of God, the Passover, all these things, miraculous parting of the sea to miraculously deliver God's people into freedom. Now, here we are in Unit 5 with this idea of God and his good character, because God is not just someone who tells us what to do. Now, think of, okay, I hope everyone has at least one. This will make me super excited if I don't have one. But think of your most favorite teacher ever. Right now. Growing up, most favorite teacher. Okay? You all have at least one, right? Comes to mind? Okay. What made that teacher so special? What made them so special? Just think about it, okay? I have several. I have several teachers in my life that come to mind. Okay, this is a side note. If you ever have a chance to tell your teachers thank you, do it, okay? Because they do the Lord's work for very little money, okay? What they do is so important in our society, but they don't get appreciated, most of the good ones. So, good teachers, what do? What makes them really special? It's not just that they teach well. Good teachers have to teach well too. They don't just make a subject fun or exciting, but they are people who also know how to build relationship with you. The best teachers, you listen to them because you trust them, because something about them, the way they talk to you as students, or the way they relate to you, the way they talk to you, something about them helps you trust them, that this teacher believes the very best in me, and they want me to do well. And even if I don't get a good grade, I can learn well from them, right? It's built on relationship. The same thing with God. If we don't actually know and believe with the deepest part of our heart that God is good, and because he is good, everything he says is actually good for me. Do you get what I'm saying? If we only hear the rules, when you go to school, what are the rules? There's this saying that I hear that everything in life you learn in kindergarten. Like, wash your hands. That's important, okay? Like, don't push your friends off the monkey bars. don't do that kind of stuff, okay? Like, be nice to people, keep your hands to yourself, like these are the rules for life, okay? But those rules, they go to school, these are the rules. But who's had bad teachers? Okay, think of the bad teachers, okay? What made them bad? Some of them, they can't teach. That's one of them, okay? Some of them, it's because they're really, really mean, Like they have favorites and it's so obvious and they don't actually you can't trust them that they want your best, right? The bad teachers are the ones that they tell you what to do, but you don't want to hear it because you don't actually like them. They don't actually like you. Does that make sense? So if you know the rules, that's fine. But if you don't trust the one who's giving you the rules, if you don't trust the person that's giving you these boundaries, then it's hard to keep those boundaries. Does that make sense? So the idea is, when we come to something like 10 Commandments, we think of these are 10 rules. Okay, yes, take a step back though. What is the heart behind the person who gave those boundaries, right? The more you know who gave them, the more you trust that person, the more these rules don't feel like restrictions, they feel like beautiful boundaries. Does that make sense? You have to know who gave them to you, the heart of the character of the person who gave them to you, so that you can actually follow them. Does that make sense? Okay. So here we are. Context. Israelites, Red Sea, miraculous, they're freed. Egypt is gone. Army is gone. They're free. 3 days later, the first test of thirst. They did not pass. They were angry at God. Second test, hunger. Complained, and yet God gave them bread from heaven every single day. And then a third test, again, thirst. So over and over again, the learning, can we actually trust that the God who set me free is someone I could live for, right? Remember I told you last time that people who face trauma or hard experiences or abandonment in their lives, that every one of us to some degree have experienced that to some extent, okay? But when we have that happen over and over again, we can't trust anyone, right? And so even though someone shows me something good, I don't actually trust it. It's like I have to see it over and over and over again. These Israelites, same thing. It's hard for them to trust God. He literally split the sea. And they're like, dude, man, water, you suck. You should let us die in the desert. That's how their response was. Because they did not trust God, they did not know God. And so here they come, finally, to the wilderness, to this very important location in the Bible, Mount Sinai. It's a very important location. It's called the Mountain of God. And if you look at the first 5 books of the Bible, which Moses wrote, there are over 600 commands given to the Israelites, okay? Remember, these are people who literally had no capacity to govern themselves. They were slaves. So they just followed Pharaoh's orders, right? But here they are now, 2 million people wandering around. And so, of course, they need law and order, or else it's anarchy. And so God gives them 600 laws, and they're divided into 3 general categories. The first category is ethical, moral laws. Like, don't murder someone. Because if everybody murders someone, there's no nation left, right? Okay? Second set of laws were around ceremonial worship, how they were to come before God. They couldn't just willy-nilly come before God however they wanted. There was a respect and a presence they had to have. The third is government laws. Because again, 2 million people in the desert, there has to be some rules. So the majority of the laws that God gives fit into those 2 last categories, worship and government. And worship no longer applies to us because who came and fulfilled all of those laws? Jesus, as the ultimate sacrifice, fulfilled all of those laws for us. So we no longer have to do what the Israelites did, right? And the third one doesn't apply to us because we're not the Israelites in a desert, okay? We have our own government laws. Now, these first set of laws, these moral codes, that's what these 10 commandments are about. That these are universal and historical. So all throughout history, all of God's people are called to follow these. Because people will say, oh, it's the Old Testament, you don't have to follow it. Well, some things you don't, but some things we do. And these ethical laws, the 10 Commandments, are one of those sets of rules that follow us all throughout history. Okay, so going back, Mount Sinai is called the Mountain of God because these 10 Commandments, There's more than this. God gave more than this for moral codes. But these 10, God specifically, it says in the Bible, he wrote them, he spoke them, and then he wrote them with his very own finger on 2 tablets of stone. So out of all the laws that God gave them, 600, something about these 10 are so significant that he wrote them himself. In fact, there's 2 versions. The first one came down, we'll see next week what happened, and then they got broken, so he wrote them again, okay? But why these 10? Like, what is so significant about these 10 that in verse 1 it says, God gave them these instructions specifically? These 10 are broken into 2 groups. The first 4 are about loving God. The next 6 are about loving others. And Jesus summed it up this way in Matthew 22. Go to Matthew 22. Matthew 22, verse 36 and 40. One of the religious leaders asked Jesus, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment?" Jesus said, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself." The entire law, everything hinges on these 2 commandments. So to sum it up, love God, love others. If you grew up in church, you've heard this a million times. And that's what's wrong with us as Christians. Because we know it. We know it all. But the most important thing is, do we live it? Do we live it? Now, this section on loving God, notice the order. Love God comes first. If we cannot love God, we cannot love others. Does that make sense? So loving others section starts in verse 2 this way. Even before he gets into commandment number 1, he starts here in verse 2. And it says this. Next slide. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. The Lord who created all things. This sovereign almighty is your Lord. And I have rescued you from Egypt, from slavery. Because I have rescued you, because I have made you, because I have delivered you. In other words, God is establishing his credibility. Why is he the one that gets to call these shots? Because Almighty Lord created the world, created his image bearers, and rescued these people from slavery. The one true God. He didn't just rescue them from slavery. He didn't just take them out of Egypt and like, okay, go have fun on your own. No, he was like, I'm going to rescue you, and now I'm going to show you how to live a free man's life. Does that make sense? Because if you've been in slavery all your life, you don't actually know how to live as a free person. And so God is saying, let me show you how to live as a free person. God did not just send Jesus to die for our sins. He died for us so that we can live a free person's life. Do you see that? It's not just his death, his life. It is that. But it's so that we can live a free person's life in Christ. Abundant life. So that's part 1. We're starting part 1. Love God. Okay. Only he can call the shot. So here's the first law, verse 3 and verse 4. You must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself an idol. Next slide. You must not misuse his name, and you must observe the Sabbath by keeping it holy. Now, I'm kind of running through it really quick, but the main idea is this. Because God is the one who rescued us, because he's good, because he's the one who made us, because he knows what's best for us, this is what he's asking of us. Does that make sense? Instead of, these are the rules, I got to keep them, different attitude, right? Like, this is the one who made us in his image. So he knows best how I'm called to live. He's saying, don't worship other gods because the other gods cannot do anything for you. They will suck you dry. He's saying, don't make other idols because they're worthless. Don't give your life to that. He's saying, don't take my name in vain because my name is meant to be powerful. He's saying, don't work on the Sabbath because you are meant to embrace your limitation and learn how to trust in God. Ultimately, God is teaching his people and all of us today that these are beautiful boundaries that God has given us so that we can live the freest, richest, most abundant life. And that starts with what? Not an obligation to follow rules, but it starts with a call to love God wholeheartedly. Love God wholeheartedly. So let me ask you right now, all of you sitting in this room, watching online, I want you to ask yourselves, as a Christian, my calling is to love God. Regardless of what special giftings God has given each of us, regardless of what job or career, those are just extra things. That's secondary. The primary call you have on your life as a Christian is to love God and know him deeply. I've been married for 10 years now. Knew him for 3 years before that, so 13 years, okay? That's like some of your guys' lives, like 2/3 of your lives, okay? Okay? But the point is, that's a long time. But I still feel like there are some days that I'm like, man, I did not know that about you. Like, you are so interesting. You know, that's where we are in a marriage. But like, there are still things that I'm learning about my husband, and he's learning about me. Because the more you know someone and love someone, the more there is to know about them and love about them. It's kind of weird. It just never ends. Even my own kids, I literally gave birth to two of them, right? I only have 2, but I gave birth to them, and they are literally my flesh and blood. But every day, also, especially with the youngest, every day is like a new day of discovering who Jiyoung is going to be today. What kind of person is she going to be that day? What kind of new word or phrase is she saying? Okay, guys, I have to share this. It's so cute, okay? Watch how you live, because kids literally watch everything, okay? So I've been trying to get more steps in, new year, okay? So we're at home this week, and it was just me and Jiyoung. And I was on my phone answering some work calls, but I was gonna take steps, okay? So I was walking around my like downstairs, like on my phone, answering like work emails and stuff, and I'm like walking like this. And I think it's been like 5 minutes, and I don't even notice until I hear like a little sound behind me. Homegirl has this like little Bororo cell phone toy, and she's literally like a shadow. She's like right here behind me, and she's like on her phone doing the exact same thing as me. And I was like, oh my gosh, kids literally just watch and learn. They don't anyway, it's crazy. Like every day she's doing something new. I'm still learning about this kid every day. Same thing with God. Every day you spend with God, you learn something new and different and richer and deeper. Because imagine how deep God is compared to even a human being. You could spend eternity worshiping him, knowing him, and still not know all of him. Because it's God. If you could finish knowing him, he wouldn't be God. Does that make sense? Like forever and ever and always. So, as a person of God, your calling is to love and know God deeply and richly. So let me ask you, and I want you to ask yourselves, where are the areas in my life that I have placed other things above God in my admiration, in my worship? For me, I have a very clear one. Number 4 is hardest for me. Sabbath, rest is really hard for me. We don't actually practice the Sabbath like the Israelites did, but the idea of rest is the takeaway. That when you rest, you are trusting that God will take care of you. Does that make sense? If you are Asian or Asian adjacent, okay, meaning like you got an Asian person in your life or whatever, okay, you know who's the worst people in the world who don't know how to rest? Look around. These people, okay? Look at your parents. Rest was not modeled for us well. They didn't have that luxury, okay? And I don't mean like rest, like just binge watch Netflix. I mean like you can, but like it's not always restful to do that. You know what I mean? Like true rest, meaning true rest in God. Like I can turn everything off and it's okay. I can sit with my thoughts before God and I won't implode. Okay? Like we are not good at that as a generation. So what does it look like? What does it look like? And when I do chase other idols, what are the consequences of that? You have to ask yourself this regularly, because we wander regularly. We are like sheep, always led astray, always distracted, always run off course. We got to course correct all the time. That's who we are. So, how is your love with God going? How is it going? How are you loving and knowing God? How have you let him love you and be known by him? It goes both ways. It's not just me knowing God, it's me also being loved by God. I would probably argue that for a lot of you, maybe you don't have a deep understanding of love of God because you don't let him love you the way he wants to. I would argue that for a lot of us, that's like that. So what does it look like to let God love us beyond our boundaries of how I define love? Part 2, love others. Here we go. There's a lot in here. Verse 12. Honor your parents. This is the only command with the actual promise. It says, if you honor your parents, you will live a long, full life. Who wants to live a long, full life? Healthy, full. I don't know what that means exactly. I should know that. I'm going to look into it. Full, healthy, full. Doesn't mean fat. It means full, okay? Who wants to live a full life? Raise your hands. Here we go. Honor your parents. Now, we all know we do not have perfect parents, okay? And a lot of the time, maybe you don't have connection with your parents very deeply. But in your life circumstance, what does it look like to honor them? What looks like honoring for me will look different than like Grace honoring her parents or Daniel honoring his parents. It will look different, right? Because our parents are different, our situations are different. But what does it look like in my life to honor them in the ways that I can, in the ways that God calls me to, right? Because if you do, you will live a long, full life, okay? Rest of them. You must not murder. Please don't do that. You must not commit adultery. Why? Because families are important to God. Because families are important to God. We all know when families fall apart, who gets the greatest brunt of it? It's the kids. God loves families. So he's saying, don't break them. You must not steal. You must not lie. You must not covet. You must not envy. Now, all these things, these laws are very clear on initial glance, right? And actually, this is the basis and the backbone for majority of Western government laws nowadays, right? But why is loving others so important? You know? This is why it's important. 1 John. This is a really important passage. 1 John 4:10-11. This is real love. John is saying, here, look, this is a real thing. It's not because we love God, but actually he loved us first. And he sent his son. So in other words, he's saying, he didn't just tell you he loves you, he actually sent his son to die for you. God demonstrated his love for you. Not just words, but through actions. How many of you don't believe what people say until you see their actions, right? It's true. That's what you should measure it by, okay? Side note, my son, he had never seen Frozen until like 2 weeks ago. And I think some of his friends were singing the song, Let It Go. It's old. He saw it, and he was devastated. And he doesn't like the movie. Do you know why? Do you guys know why? Because Prince Hans, he looks really great at the beginning, right? And then you know what Elsa says in that line when they ask for permission to get married? And she's like, you can't marry a guy you just met. Correct. You can't do that. He was devastated that he betrayed Anna. He was like, I don't like this movie. It's not good. I'm like, okay, you're triggered. It's all right. Don't be like Prince Hans one day, okay? The point being, where was my point, you guys? Where was I going? Oh, real love, okay? Actions, okay? God doesn't just say he loves you. He sent his son to love you, to die for you. And he's saying, because he loves us first, shouldn't we love each other? If someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar. Dude, the Bible be real honest here. Not holding back. If we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? That is truth right there. The main idea is this. If you truly love God, If you've truly given your life to God, do you know how you know? How you know that you really love God? Do you know how you know? By how you love others. Not that you're perfect in it, but that we're held to a different standard, and you know it in your soul now. In other words, how you love others is the litmus test. Science, who remembers? What's the litmus test? Tests what? Do you guys remember? The pH level of something, correct? Everyone looks at me like they're all confused, okay? The point being, a litmus test, how you love others is the litmus test for true conversion or not. Have you really given your life to Jesus? Are you really growing in God? You know how you can tell? How your love for others has shifted. It will change. This will change. We're not perfect. I still make mistakes. But how about you? Think about the top 5 to 10 people in your life, okay, right now, in your mind. Who do you see the most in your everyday? Think about 1 week. In 1 week, who do you see? 5 to 10 people. Start naming it. 5 to 10 people that you see the most in your life, okay? Start naming it. You know them. 5 to 10 people in your everyday life, in your everyday week, you see regularly. That is your sphere of influence. Or they influence you, one or the other, okay? Now, how are you loving those people well? Those 5 to 10 people. How are you like, that question changed real fast. I don't like where you're going with this, Stacy. I saw most of your faces. Okay, 5 to 10 people. How are you loving those people well? Reverse question, maybe how are you not loving them well? Okay? Does that reflect the love you have for God? It's true. If you cannot love those that you can see with your eyes, how can you say you love a God that we cannot see with our eyes? So here's our main point today. Love God, love others. That is God's boundary for us. His expectations of us as image bearers. What this shows us, because think about the ones. Don't lie, don't steal, don't be the last one. Don't be jealous, don't be envious. All you have to do is scroll through social media for 10 minutes and you'll probably be triggered to be jealous about something that you don't have, right? Like our life, it's so easy to do these things. What these laws show us is that we actually can't keep any of them by ourselves. You can try, you go for a little while, but like eventually you're gonna fall. So what does this show us? That this is God's standard and none of us can fulfill it. That is why Jesus. That is why Jesus. Thank the good Lord we live on the other side of Jesus because we get to experience a life of freedom and redemption that only Jesus can do. Imagine if you were born on the other side. If you were one of the Israelites wandering around the desert, that'd be so hard. We get the benefit of living post-Jesus and him dying and knowing that he came for us. Can I have the facing up? In other words, without knowing God, without loving him, without deep relationship with him, we actually cannot do and live the way God has called us to live. So if you're trying to do the opposite, like, I got to do all the right things so I can live for God. My friend, that is the opposite. It's the opposite. You cannot do all these things to then be accepted by God. It is the other way around. When I surrender my life to God and he comes and his love fills me, then I can actually love him in return and love others. Do you know what changes the heart of a person? You know the example I gave you, someone who experienced a lot of trauma and abandonment, who can't trust anybody? Do you know what breaks it for them? When they truly realize that person truly loves them, it changes everything. Same thing for us. When we truly realize God's love for us, then we can love him, and then we can love others. So if you're just stuck on like, it's so hard to love others. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's so hard. Go back to the very beginning. Have I experienced God's love for me this week? Have I experienced his love? And if not, then say, Lord, I need you again. I need to experience your love again. Because without that, literally everything falls apart. Can we all stand? We're going to sing this song together. It's Lord, I need you. And as we sing, let this song be your prayer.